Lena Carter walked into the office that morning like it was any other day. The rain outside had been soft and steady, tapping against the glass windows of the tall building. She carried her coffee in one hand and her laptop bag in the other, smiling politely at the few coworkers who nodded as she passed. She had been working at the company for almost 3 years, and even though things had never been perfect, she had always tried to do her best. She sat at her small desk near the window, opened her computer, and started reading the long list of emails that had piled up overnight. There was a quiet hum of keyboards and the faint sound of phones ringing. It felt normal, safe, like any usual morning. But as she was replying to a client's question, a message popped up from HR asking her to come to the conference room at 9:30. It said, "Quick meeting." Nothing serious. Lena didn't think much of it. She saved her work, brushed off her hands, and checked the time. It was still early. She had been helping a new intern last week with some training documents, so she thought maybe HR just wanted to discuss that. She even rehearsed a few words in her mind about improving the training process. When she walked into the room, 3 people were already sitting there: Ryan Cole, her supervisor, Melissa Hart, the HR manager, and another HR assistant who didn't even look up when Lena entered. The air in the room felt different. It was too still, too quiet. Ryan's usual smug smile was gone. "Please, sit down," Melissa said. Her tone was cold, professional, without any warmth. Lena sat, her stomach tightening slightly. She didn't like the way they were looking at her. Melissa folded her hands on the table and began, "Lena, we've been reviewing your recent work and some concerns were raised regarding improper training procedures with the new hire." Lena blinked, not sure she had heard correctly. "Improper training," she repeated slowly. "I followed the handbook exactly. The intern was shadowing me. I made sure every step was documented." Ryan cleared his throat and spoke with that same tone he always used when pretending to care. "It's not personal, Lena. But there were mistakes. The client data you showed the trainee wasn't authorized. It's a serious issue." Her mouth went dry. She looked at him, confused. "That's not true. I never showed." Melissa interrupted, sliding a paper across the table. "This is the official report. After reviewing it, the company has decided to terminate your position effective immediately." For a moment, Lena didn't move. She just stared at the paper. Her heartbeat grew louder in her ears. "Terminate?" she whispered. "Yes," Melissa said flatly. "You'll receive 2 weeks of severance pay. Please turn in your badge and company laptop before you leave the building." Ryan looked away, pretending to check his phone. He couldn't even meet her eyes. Lena felt heat rush up her neck. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't do anything wrong. You can check the logs, the training sessions, everything was approved." Melissa gave a polite but cold smile. "The decision has been made. There's nothing more to discuss." It was as if the ground had dropped beneath her. Her hands shook as she reached for the paper, scanning the lines filled with formal words that didn't make sense. She looked back up, trying to find one sign of understanding, one bit of kindness. But there was none. She stood slowly. Her throat hurt from holding back tears. "After everything I've done here," she said quietly, "you're firing me for something I didn't do?" Melissa didn't answer. Ryan only muttered, "It's just how things work sometimes, Lena." That sentence broke something inside her. She gave a small, bitter laugh. "Yeah," she said. "I guess it is." She turned and walked out of the room before they could say another word. Her legs felt heavy, but she kept walking straight to her desk. A few coworkers looked up, sensing something wrong. She didn't say anything. She just started gathering her things, her coffee mug, a small plant she had kept by the window, and a few papers. Her fingers were cold. As she packed, she noticed her reflection in the dark screen of her monitor, pale, eyes wide, a mix of anger and disbelief. It didn't feel real. She had worked late nights, solved problems no one else could, helped others without ever asking for credit. And this was how they ended it, with a cold meeting and fake words about training. She walked to the exit, turned in her badge at the front desk, and pushed through the glass doors into the gray Seattle morning. The wind felt colder now. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, staring at the building that had been her second home. People inside were still typing, still smiling, still pretending everything was fine. She wanted to scream. Instead, she took a deep breath, opened her phone, and checked her emails one last time. Her inbox was full of unread messages, but one caught her eye, a message she didn't remember seeing before, sent late last night. The subject line read, Data Access, Ryan. She opened it, and her heart skipped a beat. It was a forwarded message thread. In it, Ryan was asking the IT department to move a client's confidential file using her credentials, her name. He had done it behind her back. The pieces started to fall into place in her mind. She stared at the message for a long time, then looked up at the office tower again. The anger that rose in her chest was sharp and steady. They thought they could ruin her name and walk away smiling. She tightened her grip on her phone and whispered under her breath, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." And with that, she turned and walked away. Lena sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel as the rain hit the windshield harder now. Her chest felt tight, her breathing shallow. She had just been fired, humiliated in front of people who barely even knew what she actually did for the company. Her mind replayed every word from that meeting: improper training, data leak, final decision. It sounded like a script, rehearsed and emotionless. She leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady herself. But the image of Ryan's calm face wouldn't go away. He had looked almost relieved when she was told to leave. That fake, forced tone of sympathy had made her stomach twist. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, it had been planned. After a few long minutes, Lena opened her laptop. Her fingers were cold, but she moved quickly, logging into her company account. She expected to see an access denied message, but surprisingly, her credentials still worked. The IT department hadn't disabled her account yet. They always waited until the end of the day to process terminations. Her heart beat faster. She was angry, but beneath that anger was something sharper: determination. She began checking her emails again, scrolling back to that thread she had seen outside the building. The one that had Ryan's name on it. The subject line still made her skin crawl: Data Access, Ryan. She clicked it open and read carefully this time. The message showed Ryan requesting the transfer of a confidential client file using her name. The IT support reply was attached below, confirming it had been done under L. Carter's authorization. Lena stared at the screen. It was all right there. He had used her account to move data, and now he had pinned the blame on her. Her mouth went dry as the truth settled in. Ryan had set her up. For months, he had been cutting corners, taking credit for her work, and now he had finally gone too far. She could almost hear his voice saying it wasn't personal. It always was. She opened another folder, her old work documents. Most of them were standard files, but buried inside a project directory was a series of logs she had once used to test security scripts. They contained timestamps, usernames, and access points. If she could cross-check Ryan's activities against those logs, she could prove everything. The rain outside grew heavier, but Lena barely noticed. Her focus was absolute. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she searched through folders, piecing together evidence. The timestamps matched. Ryan had logged in after hours using her account multiple times. It wasn't just one file, it was several. And Melissa from HR had approved his reports afterward, covering for him. Her lips parted slightly as she whispered to herself, they knew. The more she uncovered, the angrier she became. She wasn't just fired unfairly, she had been used to protect their mistakes. They thought she would disappear quietly, that she'd just move on. But now, sitting alone in her car, she realized she had something powerful: proof. She checked the time. It was only 10:15 a.m. Her access was still open. She had a window, maybe an hour or two before they shut her out completely. A quiet smile crossed her face for the first time that morning. Lena plugged in her backup drive and began downloading everything: logs, emails, client reports, approval forms, anything that showed the pattern of lies. She worked fast, copying folder after folder. Her reflection on the laptop screen looked like a stranger, calm, focused, almost cold. Once the data was secured, she sat back and looked out the windshield. The rain had started to slow down, and the gray clouds above were beginning to break. People hurried along the sidewalks, umbrellas up, cars rushing past, unaware that in one small sedan, a fired employee was preparing to turn an entire company upside down. Lena opened a new document and began writing down everything in order: the timeline of Ryan's actions, the HR approval, and her own training session records. She wanted everything organized. She wasn't going to act out of rage, she was going to act smart. Her phone buzzed. A message from her old coworker, Nina Lopez, appeared. "Hey, I just heard. They let you go? What happened?" Lena stared at the message, then typed back slowly, "I'll explain later." "But they're not getting away with it." Nina replied with a single word, "Good." Lena smiled faintly. It was strange how a small word could give her strength. She took a deep breath and started planning. She knew a few journalists from tech blogs who used to interview her team about their software projects. If she sent them this data anonymously, it would explode online before lunch. And if she included the internal HR emails showing the cover-up, there would be no hiding it. The thought sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't revenge anymore, it was justice. They had fired her for her training, but she was about to give them a lesson they would never forget. She looked down at her coffee cup in the holder, now cold, untouched. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Guess I'm not done working yet," she said softly. The car's engine hummed as she turned the ignition. She was no longer that quiet, nervous employee who followed every rule. She was the woman they underestimated, and she had 5 hours left before lunch. Lena drove home through the quiet, wet streets of Seattle, her mind racing faster than her car. The city looked dull through the raindrops on her windshield, but inside her head everything was sharp and alive. She replayed the HR meeting again and again, hearing Ryan's calm, fake voice, seeing Melissa's cold face, and remembering how helpless she had felt sitting in that chair. She had walked out thinking her career was over, but now she knew better. They had made one mistake: they had fired her too early. By the time she reached her apartment, it was almost 10:30 a.m. She tossed her coat on the chair and placed her laptop on the kitchen table. The room was small, quiet, filled with the smell of coffee from the morning. It was the same space where she had worked during late nights, solving the problems no one else could. Now it would be her war room. She opened the laptop again, half expecting to see her account locked. It wasn't. She was still in. That was all the confirmation she needed. She had time. Maybe not much, but enough to make them pay. Her fingers moved fast as she organized the files she had copied earlier. She created a new folder on her desktop titled Truth. Inside it, she began sorting everything: one folder for emails, one for system logs, one for HR approvals, and another for internal messages. Each file told a story, not just of her innocence, but of how Ryan and Melissa had been manipulating the system for months. Lena wasn't a hacker, but she understood the company's infrastructure better than anyone. She had written parts of it. She knew where everything was stored, what could be traced, and what couldn't. And that knowledge was her weapon now. As she clicked through the files, she found an internal chat between Ryan and Melissa. It wasn't about her directly, but it confirmed her suspicions. Ryan had made a mistake with a client's data transfer. The file was lost, and he needed someone to blame. Melissa's message read, "If this comes out, we'll both be in trouble. Handle it quietly." Lena stared at the words for a long time. Handle it quietly. That's what they had done, by firing her. Her anger grew, but it wasn't wild anymore. It was steady, sharp, and focused. They had taken her name, her effort, her years of work, and used them as a shield for their lies. She wasn't going to let that stand. She checked the clock. It was 10:45 a.m. The company would probably notice her account still active soon, maybe within the hour. She had to move fast. Lena began drafting her report. She opened a new document and started typing. Her words were simple and clear. This report contains evidence of internal data manipulation, unauthorized access, and HR misconduct at Deltasoft Technologies. The actions were carried out by Supervisor Ryan Cole and approved by HR Manager Melissa Hart. She included screenshots, timestamps, and internal communications. Every detail was precise. She wanted anyone reading it, an investigator, a journalist, even a federal agent, to see how neatly they had framed her and how easily she had proven them wrong. As she worked, her phone rang once, showing a number she didn't recognize. Probably HR, she thought. She let it ring. Then a text came through, "Please return your company laptop today." She ignored that too. The laptop was hers now, at least for the next few hours. The sound of typing filled the room. She moved quickly, attaching proof, highlighting sections, adding short notes. When she was done, the document was 20 pages long. Her hands shook slightly, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. She was ready. She took a sip of water, then opened her email again. She created a new anonymous address, something untraceable. From there, she prepared to send her report to several places, 3 tech news websites, 1 legal firm that handled whistleblower cases, and the client whose data Ryan had mishandled. Before hitting send, she paused. A memory flashed in her mind, her first day at the company. She had been so proud back then, so hopeful. She had believed hard work would always be noticed, that fairness still existed. She almost laughed at how naive she had been. But that Lena was gone now. This Lena understood how the game was played, and how to win it. She took a deep breath and clicked send. The progress bar moved slowly, painfully, until the message finally disappeared from her outbox. It was done. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of her laptop. She stared at the screen, half expecting some explosion of noise or light, but nothing happened. The world outside kept moving. Cars passed, rain fell, people walked by, all unaware that she had just changed the fate of an entire company. Her phone buzzed again, another message from HR, this time saying, "Your access will be deactivated soon." Lena smiled faintly. "A little late," she murmured. She leaned back in her chair and looked out the window. The sky was still gray, but a thin line of sunlight had started to break through the clouds. It reflected faintly on the wet streets below, like the city itself was waking up. It was only 11:10 a.m. She had taken her first sip of coffee that morning as an employee. Now, just a few hours later, she was the reason her company was about to face a storm bigger than any they could imagine. Lena closed her laptop slowly, a quiet confidence in her eyes. They had fired her for her training. Now they were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. Lena sat at her kitchen table and stared at the screen. The folder labeled Truth felt heavier now. She had organized every piece of evidence into neat files. She had logs, emails, screenshots, and a clear timeline. It all fit together like a map. She could see exactly how Ryan had used her name to move files, and how Melissa had signed off on the false report. She knew what to do next, but she did not want to rush. This was not about anger now. It was about making sure the story could not be buried. She thought about who would listen. Tech blogs would jump on a scandal. The client would want answers. A federal agency might open an investigation. She needed to reach all of them at once. Lena opened a new browser window. She created a throwaway email account with a name that meant nothing. She knew how to cover her tracks. She used a public Wi-Fi network at a small coffee shop down the street, just in case the company traced logins. Her hands did not shake. She felt steady and careful. She wrote a short note to go with the files. The note was simple and direct. It explained the timeline. It named Ryan and Melissa. It described how confidential files were moved using Lena's credentials and how HR later blamed her. She attached the key logs and the chat threads that showed clear intent. She added the link to the internal audit she had found. Everything a reporter or investigator would need to start asking questions. Her first recipient was a well-known tech reporter she had met at a conference last year. The reporter had a reputation for digging into corporate mistakes. Lena had their email saved in a contact list on an old phone. She typed a short subject line, urgent, internal data misuse at Deltasoft Technologies, evidence attached. Then she attached the files and hit send. She did the same with 2 other outlets. One was a local newspaper that often covered business scandals. The other was a national tech site that could make the story go viral. She copied the client, the one whose files had been mishandled. She included a professional law firm that handled whistleblower cases and a federal cybersecurity tip line. Before she sent anything, Lena hesitated. The last pause was not because she feared exposure. It was because of the people who would be hurt by this, honest coworkers who would lose their jobs if the company collapsed. She thought of Nina, who had messaged her with the short word, good. She thought of others who worked late and trusted the company. Her heart tightened. She rewrote one sentence. Where she could, she left out names of low-level staff. She focused the blame on those who had clearly acted to hide the truth. She wanted the guilty held accountable. She did not want innocent people punished for someone else's greed. At 11:15 a.m., Lena clicked send. The files left her computer and flowed into the inboxes of reporters and officials. She watched the progress bar and then the confirmation message. It felt unreal, like the moment after a diving board jump when the water is the only thing you see below. She closed the laptop and walked to the sink. Her hands moved automatically as she washed a cup. Outside, the rain had stopped and the sky had a pale, brittle light. The city carried on. People rushed past the coffee shop, carrying umbrellas and bags, unaware. Lena felt both small and immense at the same time. Small because she was alone in a messy apartment. Immense because a quiet file on her screen could change a lot of lives. Minutes later, her phone buzzed. The anonymous email account had a reply. A reporter wrote back, asking for a call and a secure place to send their questions. Another outlet asked for confirmation of a timestamp. The law firm asked for more documentation and said they could forward it to investigators. Lena kept calm and answered with short, factual messages. She refused to reveal her name. She wanted the facts to stand alone. At 11:30 a.m., she saw something on a news site she had not expected so soon. A short post mentioned that a tech blog had received a tip about a possible data mishandling at Deltasoft. The post did not mention names yet, but it suggested that an internal cover-up could be involved. Lena felt a cold wave roll through her. The water had hit the pool. Back at the company, panic spread fast. The PR team scrambled through phone calls. By the time the outlets tried to get comment, the company issued only vague statements about reviewing internal processes. That worried Lena in a way she did not expect. The company could lie. It could spin words and confuse people. She had to be precise. She sent the reporters a clear timeline, with highlights and key files that proved the dates and actions. The reporter from the national site called. Lena's voice was steady and low as she answered questions about timestamps and system logs. She gave only what she had to. She did not tell them about the small backup she had kept at home. That was her final insurance. At 11:45 a.m., a message from Nina appeared in her phone, "Everything okay? I'm hearing things." Lena typed back, "Not yet. But it will be." She did not want Nina to be more involved than she already was. By noon, social media began to pick up the thread. People speculated. Comments flew. Deltasoft's name trended in small circles. Lena put down the phone and breathed. She felt a weight lift, but only a little. She had started a chain reaction, but she had not yet seen the end. She sipped cold coffee and watched the city through her window. The light had warmed a bit, and the wet streets shimmered. Lena thought about what came next: lawyers, investigators, angry executives. Maybe a lawsuit. Maybe ruin for some. Maybe justice for her. She also thought about what it meant to act alone. It was not heroic. It was lonely and messy. But she had done what she believed was right. For once, she felt no shame. She had been fired for her training, and now, with calm hands, she had shown a different kind of lesson. At 11:30 a.m., the storm she had quietly set in motion began to unfold. Lena sat at a small corner table in the cafe near her apartment, sipping from a fresh cup of hot coffee. The rain had stopped completely now, replaced by thin sunlight breaking through clouds. The street outside looked calm, but her phone screen was lighting up every few minutes with notifications. News alerts. Emails. Messages from former coworkers. The first alert made her breath catch. A tech site had published the report she'd sent, headline bold and sharp: "Whistleblower reveals data manipulation scandal inside Deltasoft Technologies." Beneath it were words she knew too well, phrases taken straight from her files, her documentation, her truth. They had redacted her name, listing her only as a former employee familiar with internal operations. Lena's fingers trembled slightly as she scrolled. The article was detailed, clean, professional. It included evidence she had provided, images of internal chats, quotes from HR memos. The words "systematic misconduct" and "unauthorized access" repeated through the text like drumbeats. It wasn't just her story anymore, it was public now, impossible to silence. She took a long sip of her coffee, her heart steady and full of something she hadn't felt in months: control. Back at Deltasoft's headquarters, chaos was spreading like wildfire. She imagined the scene: Ryan pacing his office, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice growing louder with each call. Melissa trying to calm the board members, her tone smooth but cracking around the edges. The IT department scrambling to lock systems and trace leaks, too late to contain any of it. Lena opened her messages again. A flood of unread texts filled the screen. Nina had written, "Everyone's freaking out. Ryan's been called into a meeting with the CEO. HR's office is locked. What did you do?" Lena smiled faintly at the message but didn't reply yet. She didn't need to explain. By now, everyone in that building probably knew exactly who had done it, even if her name wasn't in the article. A new notification popped up from one of the smaller news outlets. They had followed up on the story, quoting Deltasoft's official statement. The company claimed they were conducting an internal review and taking the matter very seriously. Lena almost laughed out loud. She could picture them scrambling to write that line, probably within minutes of the news breaking. Then another alert came in, one that made her sit up straighter. The client whose data had been mishandled released a statement saying they were suspending all ongoing projects with Deltasoft until the investigation was completed. Lena whispered to herself, "That's it." One client pulling out was bad enough, but this client was their largest one. Without them, Deltasoft's profits would fall apart within weeks. The effect would be instant. She refreshed the news feed again. More articles appeared. A business blog reported that Deltasoft stock had dropped 15% in just an hour. Investors were demanding explanations. People were sharing screenshots of her evidence online, discussing it on social media. The story had gone viral. Lena felt a strange calm. She wasn't cheering or smiling, she was simply breathing easier. She had spent months being small, careful, polite, trying not to upset anyone. Now she didn't care who she upset. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call. The number looked familiar. She hesitated before answering. It was Nina. "Lena," Nina said, her voice low, almost whispering. "You didn't just shake things, you broke everything. Ryan's in the boardroom yelling, Melissa looks sick, and the CEO just shut down the floor meetings. People are scared." Lena stayed quiet for a second, then said softly, "Good. They should be." Nina exhaled through the phone. "They're saying you did this. That you leaked everything." Lena smiled a little. "I didn't leak anything, Nina. I told the truth. There was silence for a moment, then Nina said quietly, whatever you did, I hope they remember this forever. I think they will, Lena said, her tone even. Thanks, Nina. She ended the call. Outside, sunlight spilled across the wet street. A small group of office workers passed by, laughing over something on their phones, probably the same story she had written hours ago. At 11:50 a.m., another email came through. This one from a federal cybercrime division acknowledging receipt of her report. It said they were reviewing the information and might follow up for more details. She read it twice, letting the weight of those words sink in. It was really happening. She checked her watch. It was still not even noon. She had been fired just over 2 hours ago. Now her former company was in crisis, its management exposed, its reputation burning in real time. She set her coffee down and leaned back, staring out the window. She thought about the way Ryan had looked at her that morning, calm, arrogant, certain that she was powerless. She thought about Melissa's cold voice saying, the decision has been made. Those words had haunted her hours ago. Now they didn't matter. Her decision had been made too. For a moment, Lena wondered what would happen next. Would there be backlash? Maybe. Would her name come out eventually? Possibly. But none of it frightened her anymore. They had taken everything from her once already. This time, she had nothing left to lose. She stood, paid for her coffee, and walked toward the door. The bell above it chimed softly as she stepped out into the cool noon air. Her phone buzzed again, another headline update, sources inside Deltasoft confirm executive suspensions following data scandal. Lena smiled faintly as she slipped her phone into her jacket pocket. She didn't need to see the rest. She already knew how this story ended. She turned down the street, her pace steady, the light catching in her eyes. Somewhere behind her, the company that had once fired her for training was tearing itself apart. And Lena Carter, quiet, calm, ordinary Lena, had done it all before lunch. By the next morning, the story had reached everywhere. News outlets, blogs, and even local TV stations were covering it non-stop. Lena woke to the sound of her phone buzzing endlessly on the nightstand. She rubbed her eyes and saw dozens of new messages, emails from journalists, texts from former co-workers, even unknown numbers trying to reach her for comment. The screen was filled with headlines. Deltasoft under federal investigation. Data scandal rocks one of the fastest-growing tech firms. Whistleblower sparks company meltdown in hours. Each one carried the same thread of chaos and disbelief. Lena sat up slowly, staring at the sunlight slipping through her blinds. It was strange, everything outside was so calm, so peaceful. But she knew, somewhere across town, in that gleaming office tower she once worked in, nothing was calm. She opened one of the news articles. A video clip autoplayed, a reporter standing outside Deltasoft's headquarters, microphone in hand. Behind her, security guards were blocking the entrance as groups of reporters gathered. Several executives have been placed on immediate leave, the reporter was saying. The company has confirmed that its internal systems have been compromised and that federal agents are reviewing evidence of possible fraud. Lena exhaled slowly. It was more than she expected, even after everything she had done. She hadn't wanted chaos, she wanted justice. But sometimes, justice didn't come quietly. She got up, brewed a cup of coffee, and turned on her small TV. The same story was playing on 3 different channels. Every anchor repeated her evidence word for word, the same documents she had once printed late at night in fear of being caught. She stared at the screen, still trying to believe this was real. The news anchor said something that made her stop mid-sip. Anonymous insiders suggest that the whistleblower was a former employee who was terminated under questionable circumstances. Sources indicate she worked in the data security department and was fired shortly before the scandal broke. Her stomach tightened. They didn't use her name, but they didn't need to. Anyone who worked there would know who it was. Anyone who remembered that sudden firing on Monday morning would put it together. A knock on her apartment door made her jump. She set the mug down and froze for a second. Then she walked over slowly and looked through the peephole. It was Nina. When Lena opened the door, Nina's face said everything: shock, worry, and a bit of admiration mixed in. "You're all over the news," she whispered. Lena stepped aside. "Come in." Nina dropped her purse on the counter. "They know, Lena. Everyone knows it was you. Ryan lost it last night. He's been yelling that you ruined everything." "I didn't ruin anything," Lena said quietly. "I just stopped pretending." Nina looked at her, almost smiling. "You did more than stop pretending. You took down the entire company." Lena leaned against the counter, folding her arms. "They fired me over a made-up reason, Nina. They lied to clients. They used data that wasn't theirs. They destroyed people's trust. I just showed the truth." Nina nodded slowly. "Well, it's working. The board suspended Ryan and Melissa this morning. The CEO is under investigation. And guess what? Clients are pulling out one after another." Lena blinked, almost in disbelief. "Already?" "Already," Nina said. "By the end of the week, they might not even have enough cash to pay their people. Everyone's terrified." Lena was silent for a moment, her eyes drifting toward the window. It felt surreal, like a dream she couldn't quite touch. Only, this dream had sharp edges. "Do they still have my badge data in the system?" she asked suddenly. Nina shook her head. "They wiped it yesterday. Ryan ordered IT to erase all your records." Lena let out a small, ironic laugh. "Figures." Nina hesitated, then asked, "Aren't you scared, though? You know how they are. They'll try to find you. They'll want to blame someone publicly." Lena took a slow breath. "I'm not scared anymore. The truth is out there now. They can't take that back." For a while, they both just stood there in silence, the sound of the city filtering through the window, horns, voices, life moving on. Finally, Nina said softly, "You should see the comments online. People are calling you a hero. They're saying you exposed corporate greed. You might have just started something big." Lena didn't answer at first. She wasn't sure she wanted to be anyone's hero. All she had wanted was fairness. But deep down, a small warmth bloomed in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, her voice had made a difference. Later that day, she walked to the park near her apartment, the same one she used to visit on her lunch breaks back when things were normal. Children played on the grass, dogs barked, people laughed. It all looked so ordinary, untouched by everything that had happened. Lena sat on a bench and took out her phone. She opened her email again. There were new messages. One from an investigative journalist thanking her for standing up for integrity. Another from someone at a nonprofit offering to help her if she faced legal trouble. And one, the last one, from an address she didn't recognize. It was short: "You don't know me, but thank you. You helped more people than you realize." She stared at those words for a long time, her heart full. The sun began to set, painting the sky gold and orange. She leaned back on the bench, watching it quietly. Somewhere downtown, in a glass office tower filled with panic and blame, her name was being whispered in fear and anger. But here, in this small pocket of calm, Lena finally felt peace. For the first time since she'd been fired, she wasn't thinking about revenge or loss or what might come next. She was thinking about how it felt to take her power back. And as the city lights flickered to life, she knew one thing with quiet certainty: this was only the beginning. The following days unfolded like a strange dream, half chaos, half calm. The world outside seemed normal, but inside the digital sphere, Lena's story had become a storm. Everyone wanted to know who she was. News sites called her the whistleblower of DeltaSoft. Social media was flooded with posts praising her courage and condemning corporate corruption. Lena tried to stay quiet, to disappear into the rhythm of ordinary life. She walked her usual route to the grocery store, watered her small plants by the window, and drank her coffee each morning at the same cafe. Yet, every time she glanced at her phone, she was reminded that anonymity was slipping away. People were guessing her identity online, former coworkers, tech forums, even random strangers. Her face wasn't public yet, but it was only a matter of time. That morning, her phone buzzed with a message from Nina. "They've confirmed it, Lena. Ryan mentioned your name in a meeting. The board knows." Lena stared at the message. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't panic. Deep down, she had known this would happen. You can't tear down a system from the inside and expect to stay invisible. A few minutes later, her phone rang again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Carter," a calm male voice said. "This is Agent Lewis from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We'd like to speak with you regarding the DeltaSoft data leak." Her throat went dry. "Am I in trouble?" "No, ma'am," the agent said gently. "Actually, your evidence has been crucial to our investigation. We just need to verify a few details in person. Are you available today?" For a moment, she couldn't speak. The thought of federal agents knowing her name, her address, her role, it felt heavy, but also right. She took a steady breath. "Yes," she said. "I'll be home." When the knock came later that afternoon, it wasn't dramatic like in the movies, no black cars or flashing lights. Just two agents in suits, polite and professional. They showed her their IDs, stepped inside, and asked her calm, direct questions. "How long did you have access to the internal servers? When did you first notice the data manipulation? Why did you decide to come forward?" Lena answered honestly. She told them about the day she discovered the files, about Ryan's pressure to alter reports, about being fired for training. She told them how powerless she had felt, how the system was built to silence people like her. When she finished, one of the agents, a woman named Torres, leaned forward and said quietly, "You did the right thing, Ms. Carter. What you exposed could have gone on for years without anyone noticing." The words hit Lena harder than she expected. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear them. After the agents left, she sat alone for a long while, staring at the quiet glow of her living room. Her laptop sat on the table, the same one she'd used to gather every file, every line of evidence. It looked harmless now, but it had once held enough power to bring down a corporation. That night, as she scrolled through the news again, she saw a new headline that made her freeze. DeltaSoft executives face criminal charges following whistleblower investigation. It was official. Ryan, Melissa, and two others had been charged with data fraud, obstruction, and evidence tampering. Their photos appeared beside the article, faces pale, eyes empty. The same people who had once looked down on her with smug confidence now looked defeated and afraid. She leaned back and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands trembled slightly. For months, she had dreamed of this moment, justice finally reaching those who had taken everything from her. But now that it was real, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like release. She scrolled down and read a line that made her pause. "The whistleblower's actions are being reviewed for commendation under the Whistleblower Protection Act." Her eyes blurred for a second. Commendation. That was the last thing she expected. She had acted out of desperation, not heroism. She never wanted to be recognized, just heard. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Nina. "They're gone, Lena. All of them. You did it." Lena typed back slowly, "We did it." Outside, the city lights shimmered across the skyline. Somewhere out there, life was moving forward, unchanged, uncaring, but for her, everything had shifted. She turned off her phone, closed her laptop, and stepped out onto the small balcony of her apartment. The night air was cool, carrying the faint hum of traffic and the distant sound of laughter. She looked up at the stars, small and steady above the chaos of the world below. In the silence, she thought about that moment in Ryan's office, the humiliation, the anger, the quiet promise she made to herself. She had kept it. Not out of vengeance, but out of truth. Now, as the wind brushed through her hair and the city breathed around her, she whispered softly to herself, "It's over." But deep down, she knew it wasn't really over. Her name would surface eventually. People would reach out, some to thank her, some to criticize her. That was fine. She could handle it. Because for the first time since the day she'd been fired, Lena Carter didn't feel like a victim anymore. She felt free. Morning sunlight poured softly into Lena's apartment, painting everything gold. The air was still, almost peaceful, the kind of quiet that comes only after a long storm. For the first time in months, she woke up without the heavy knot in her chest. No meetings. No HR emails. No fear of losing her job. Just silence, and a life that finally belonged to her again. She sat up slowly, staring at the faint reflection of herself in the mirror across the room. There were shadows under her eyes, yes, but her expression was calm. She looked older somehow, wiser, tougher, and more certain of who she was. She'd survived something that had nearly broken her, and in the process, she'd built a strength she never knew she had. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She hesitated before picking it up. The screen was full of unread messages, some from reporters, some from strangers thanking her, and one from a law firm offering her representation in case Deltasoft tried to retaliate. She ignored them all for now and opened the one from Nina. It simply said, "They're shutting it down, Lena. Deltasoft's officially finished. The board dissolved the company this morning." Lena stared at the message for a long time. It didn't feel real, not entirely. The company that had once seemed untouchable, that had crushed her with arrogance and lies, was gone. Finished. She got up, made herself coffee, and opened the window. The cool breeze drifted in, carrying the smell of rain from the night before. Somewhere below, the city was waking up, cars passing, dogs barking, people heading to work. The world had moved on, as it always does, but she felt like she was standing at the edge of something new. The TV hummed softly in the background. She turned up the volume just in time to catch the news anchor's words. Federal investigators have confirmed that Deltasoft Technologies will be permanently closed following the charges against several top executives. The anonymous whistleblower responsible for exposing the misconduct is being hailed online as a hero. Lena let out a small breath of disbelief. A hero. The word didn't feel right. She didn't feel heroic. She felt human. She'd made mistakes. She'd been scared. She'd doubted herself 1,000 times. But she'd also refused to give up when it mattered most. Maybe that was enough. After breakfast, she decided to take a walk. The air was crisp and clear, the kind that carries a quiet promise of change. She passed by the cafe where she'd watched the news break that first morning. The barista looked up and smiled. "Haven't seen you in a while," he said. "The usual?" Lena smiled back. "Yeah, the usual." She sat by the window, sipping her coffee, watching the world move outside. People hurried past, some talking, some laughing, some lost in thought. Life kept going. And for the first time, she felt ready to join it again. Her thoughts drifted back to the beginning, to that awful moment in Ryan's office when he told her she was fired. She could still hear his voice, cold and self-assured. She could still see the way everyone looked at her, like she was already erased. But now, those memories didn't sting the way they used to. They were distant, like scenes from another lifetime. She had taken back her voice. She had turned humiliation into strength. And she had done it all before lunch that day. As she finished her coffee, her phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from a tech magazine asking if she'd be willing to do an anonymous interview about workplace corruption and whistleblowing. She smiled faintly. She wasn't sure yet. Maybe one day. Maybe soon. But not today. Today wasn't about explaining herself. It was about breathing. About living. About starting over. Later that afternoon, she walked through the park near her apartment. The trees were turning golden, their leaves drifting gently to the ground. A few children were playing nearby, their laughter echoing through the air. She sat on the same bench she had a few days ago, the same place where she had first realized the full weight of what she'd done. A woman nearby was reading the newspaper, the front page headline bold and familiar, Deltasoft scandal ends in total collapse. Lena watched as the woman shook her head and muttered, "Good. They deserved it." Lena turned her eyes toward the sky, a quiet smile forming on her lips. It was strange to think how fast everything had changed. 1 week ago, she had been another name on a termination list. Now, her actions had changed the course of an entire company. She hadn't meant to become a story, but she had. And in doing so, she'd reminded herself, and maybe others too, that one person's courage could still matter. As the sun began to set, she pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. Her phone vibrated again, but this time she didn't check it. She didn't need to. Whatever it was could wait. She stood and began walking home, her steps steady and light. The city glowed with evening light, soft and golden, and somewhere behind her, the story of Deltasoft was already fading into history. Lena Carter didn't look back. She didn't need to. Because in the quiet strength of that moment, she finally understood something simple and true: sometimes life tears you apart just so you can build yourself stronger. And sometimes, when they push you out the door and call it an ending, it's really the beginning of everything that's meant to come. She smiled to herself as she crossed the street, the wind brushing against her face. Lena had been fired for her training. But she'd walked away with something far greater: her power, her truth, and the peace of knowing she had done the right thing.